The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today. I am Leslie Wallach. I am the Executive Director of the National Association of Regional Councils, NARC. We're pleased to have you join us today, and we're pleased to have such a great lineup of speakers to bring you information that will help you serve your community. This is the next webinar in our series on keeping you informed. Keeping you informed and helping you move towards a new post-pandemic future. Be sure to check out our website for a multitude of resources for you to help you serve your community, serve your members, and including some of the latest on legislation that is pending in the House, talking about bringing more resources to local governments. Today we're joined by our good friends at the Economic Development Administration, EDA, of the work and support that EDA provides to our member regions, from technical assistance to public works to resiliency planning and support for entrepreneurs. EDA continues to focus on building stronger communities. We're thrilled to have you. On 27th, President Trump signed the CARES Act, providing EDA with $1.5 billion to support recovery assistance. Today, we'll get to hear from our friends at EDA to help you get the latest information you need to make sure those funds will work in the best way for your communities and the families they serve. Excuse the dog. Let me introduce our speakers today. Mr. Dana Gartsky is the Chief of Economic Development Administration and serving as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development. He previously served as the Chief of Staff at EDA, and he comes to EDA with extensive background on Capitol Hill and the Alliance of Healthcare Serving Ministries, so a long time in serving communities. And Mr. Dennis Alford, our longtime friend of NARC, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Economic Development and Chief Operating Officer. His longtime leadership at EDA includes responsibility for management, operation, program, and policy issues. Dennis has been our go-to person at EDA since the beginning of the Trump administration. We thank you both for your service, and we are pleased to join you today. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gartsky. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. It's great to be with you. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you for inviting us to speak with your membership today to speak on EDA's CARES Act recovery effort. Good morning to everyone online, and thank you for joining us. In normal times, I would have enjoyed meeting with you in person, but today we'll just have to continue to let the computer be our tech friend. Let's just keep our fingers crossed as we go. As Leslie said, I was appointed the duties of Assistant Secretary for EDA last March after Dr. Fleming was asked to join the White House staff. EDA has always taken great pride with our partners that we've developed over the years, including NARC. To all of the elected officials and regional council members and staff with us today, a big thank you for the work that you're doing to try to promote collaboration with local governments, stakeholders, and partners in the economic development arena, and for your continued relationship with us here at EDA. We know the regions you serve are suffering mightily as a result of the coronavirus, and we pray for their well-being. Critically, as Leslie said, the CARES Act provided EDA with $1.5 billion to help communities respond to COVID-19. We intend to deploy our CARES Act funding as quickly and as effectively as possible. And in large part, we can accomplish that by working closely with you, by allowing you to do what you do so well. As the folks working directly in our communities and regions planning for their future, the role you play will be invaluable to this recovery. So we're committed to helping provide the resources your communities need to get this nation moving forward once again. Today, we will share with you our comprehensive overview of EDA's CARES Act recovery plan and what we have in mind. You know many of our presenters well. Leslie's Mentioned them already. Dennis Alford is our Deputy Assistant Secretary, and Brian Borlick directs our Performance and National Programs Office, and you'll hear from them in just a moment. Of course, we want to hear from you, though, today. We want to hear about your ideas, your challenges, your opportunities, and to ask any questions you may have, and we hope to leave plenty of time for those questions today. So I just want to personally salute you for the work you're doing as you serve our communities to try and get our nation back on its feet. I'm going to ask that God will bless your work in the days ahead, and we wish you the very best working with us. And now I'm pleased to turn things over to our CEO, Dennis Alford. Dennis?
Thanks very much, Dana. It's great to be with all of you again today, virtually at least. Over my career, I've had the great pleasure of getting to know many of you in both small and large settings, and look forward to having an opportunity to be with you in person again, hopefully sometime soon. I've really enjoyed my past interactions and visiting your communities and regions to learn more about the challenges and opportunities that you confront. And as critically important customers, those interactions have really helped me to ensure that EDA remains laser focused on meeting your needs. We know that the work of your regional organizations across the country is critical to building prosperity and advancing our nation's competitiveness. I can think of no time in our nation's history where your work will mean more and be more important. So I'd like to add to Dana's sentiments and thank you for the work that you're doing to grow the economy in your regions. I'm honored to be back with you again today and working alongside of you to help to support economic growth and recovery in your communities. So why don't we go to the next slide and jump in. On March 27, President Trump signed into law the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, commonly known as the CARES Act. Through the act, Congress provided EDA $1.5 billion to help communities prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Of this funding, EDA has made $1.467 billion available directly for grant making. The remaining funds will be supporting our operations costs, salaries, expenses, and other oversight activities. On May 7, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross announced our CARES Act recovery assistance funding opportunities, and that we would begin to immediately accept applications. And I think I'm very, very pleased with the agency's responsiveness here. We were able to turn this around very, very rapidly to meet the needs of our customers. Go to the next slide. To offer maximum flexibility and to be as responsive to the economic development needs and priorities of our local and regional stakeholders as possible, we made CARES Act recovery assistance funding available through our Economic Adjustment, or EAA, program. EDA CARES Act recovery assistance investments are anticipated to support a wide variety of construction and non-construction related activities, including economic recovery planning and technical assistance strategies, resiliency plans to help respond to future pandemics. We're contemplating implementing a coronavirus-specific innovation and entrepreneurship challenge, as well as constructing public works and other critical facilities that will help support economic recovery, including the deployment of broadband to support telehealth and remote learning for job skills, among numerous other high-impact projects. Go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility. Who's eligible for EDA CARES Act funding? First of all, it's important to note that we've made a determination that economic injury from the coronavirus pandemic constitutes a special need under our EAA program, and eligibility may be established on that basis without reference to other economic distress criteria. So what that means is essentially every community in the country is eligible to apply for EDA assistance under the CARES Act. However, it's important that applicants explain clearly in their application how their project would meet the statutory intent, and that is to prevent, prepare for and respond to coronavirus or respond to the economic injury as a result of the coronavirus. Since we're administering this funding pursuant to the EAA program, eligible applicants remain the same as you would traditionally see in working with EDA. Those would include regional development organizations, American Indian tribes, states and political subdivisions of states, including counties, cities, and special purpose districts, institutions of higher education or consortium of such institutions, public or private nonprofit organizations, and other associations acting in cooperation with officials from one of those previously mentioned political subdivisions of a state. So the typical list of eligible EDA grantee organizations. Go to the next one, great. I'd like to note that EDA has been working really closely with the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council on helping to deliver relief to communities that have been affected by COVID-19. As with our core disaster supplemental funding and our regular program funding, EDA will ensure that eligible entities that are in or near opportunity zones are fully aware of EDA's CARES Act recovery assistance funding opportunities. We've been very active in the opportunity zone space. In fact, since FY 2018, EDA has invested more than $443 million in 321 projects in or near opportunity zones across the country. We've made several significant policy changes in regards to opportunity zones. Back in 2018, we made OZs eligible for funding from any Bureau Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, the agency issues, by putting them into our special needs category. Again, essentially allowing us to consider opportunity zone applications regardless of the specific level of economic distress in those areas. And then in addition to that, last year, we also added opportunity zones as an investment priority, which further prioritized them as an area of focus for Bureau grant making. So through both of these policy actions, the number of catalytic opportunity zone related projects that EDA has funded really has increased dramatically, and we certainly anticipate that it will continue to do so. And I think, taking advantage of some of the inherent benefits of the opportunity zone classification can really help to accelerate your economic development projects. Additionally, as I know many of you are aware, EDA has incorporated opportunity zones into our CEDS, our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy content guidelines, to assist local and regional planning partners in building effective approaches and taking advantage of this incentive. We encourage you to further explore some of the other resources we've developed, including USA Opportunity Zones tool that was developed by Indiana University and its Kelley School of Business under an EDA Research and Technical Assistance Grant Award. You can find that tool on the website that's on your screen. It's statsamerica.org/opportunity. It's a really valuable resource that you can use to guide some of your planning and development efforts. Go to the next one, great. So before I conclude, I'd also like to mention that Congress did provide some additional assistance to support hiring under the CARES Act. And in fact, they gave us a special hiring authority that we hope will help us to really expedite bringing on the additional staff that we need to support CARES Act implementation. So we're seeking quality job applicants for approximately 80 positions across our headquarters and regional offices to both help promote our funding opportunities to interested groups, as well as administer the grants under the CARES Act. We're committed to maintaining and hopefully even building on the high levels of customer service that you've come to expect in interacting with EDA. The employees hired under the CARES Act are hired as Schedule A temporary employees and will be on board for up to 2 years. So finally, to wrap up, I'd like to point to a few resources that will be valuable to you. One is that general EDA CARES Act recovery assistance information is now available through grants.gov. You can access our notice of funding opportunity there. I'd also encourage you to visit eda.gov/coronavirus, where you can find a lot more of additional information, supplemental materials, guidance documents that in support of the NOFO and our implementation. And finally, please visit eda.gov/careers for more information on available jobs and how to apply. We would certainly appreciate you helping us to share this information widely and get the word out about our CARES Act implementation. With that, it's now my pleasure to turn the program over to Brian Borlick, who will explain some additional components of our CARES Act implementation. Brian?
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you to everyone's participation on this webinar. This is really a great opportunity for us to share CARES Act information with such an important partner organization to EDA. Next slide, please. I'll speak about a bit about streamlined grant applications and where appropriate, where we're providing non-competitive awards to existing grantees that are already well positioned to respond to urgent public need. So what exactly is a non-competitive award? As Dennis referred to, EDA has determined that the suddenness and the scale of the economic dislocations caused by COVID-19 constitute a situation of unusual and compelling urgency, such that it would be in the public interest for EDA to make certain awards non-competitively in order to expedite the response to the pandemic. A non-competitive award is one made to a predetermined group of recipients for a specific purpose in circumstances in which a competitive process is unnecessary and would actually be less efficient. The advantage of non-competitive awards is that it allows EDA to expedite award processing and thereby accelerate recovery assistance to your communities. When it comes to the grant applications, EDA is using a simplified application process, such as with how we review the applications. For example, there's no merit review process as normal. All applicants who meet the established requirements for receiving an award and who agree to accept the terms and conditions of the award will receive the grant. This is a non-competitive process open to certain existing EDA grant recipients, which I'll speak about in just a moment. The process is open by invitation only, and invitations have been sent to eligible entities. If you believe that you might qualify and have not received an invitation letter, please do contact your economic development representative, and those can be found on eda.gov under contacts. A couple of quick points that apply to all of the awards. They'll be made at a 100% federal grant rate. The period of performance for all the awards is 24 months. Applicants can certainly request less than the maximum award amount. And then applicants who accept a non-competitive award can also apply for funding for a different scope of work through the competitive process. So as I mentioned, we're making these non-competitive awards to three existing EDA grantees. One is district organizations and tribes that currently receive EDA partnership planning grants. All these awards have a standard scope of work that include one or more of the following, and recipients are not required to address all of these, but they could be planning and coordination for disaster recovery and resiliency plans focused on pandemic recovery and resiliency, funding for regional disaster economic recovery coordinators, technical assistance for local stakeholders affected by coronavirus, and more. The maximum award amount is $400,000 for district organizations and $150,000 for tribes. Second, universities that currently receive EDA University Center grants. They can select from several scope of work activities, and again, do not need to implement all of them, but they could be providing technical assistance to entrepreneurs, businesses, and communities to assist with pandemic recovery efforts, moving courses to an online platform to provide support for the entrepreneurial community. We're supporting technology commercialization, product development, and manufacturing to address the coronavirus pandemic. The maximum award amount for university centers is $300,000. And then finally, current recipients of EDA Revolving Loan Fund grants. So RLF recipients are only eligible for non-competitive awards if all of their RLFs under their management are rated as high performers by EDA's RLF risk analysis system. Other RLFs can certainly apply through the competitive process. So with the RLFs, EDA will make a single supplemental award that can fund additional lending capital and administrative expenses to assist with the costs of managing the recipient's existing and supplemental RLF awards to respond to the pandemic. The maximum amount of additional lending capital for these RLFs, what they can request is determined by the recipient's existing capital base and cash available for lending. So it's not a set number. You'll want to speak with your economic development representative on the particulars of your potential award amount. The maximum amount of administrative funding is 10% of the additional lending capital requested. The administrative funds may be used to support additional staff or to acquire additional technology. And then finally, time is of the essence. Just to note that EDA is looking to ensure that the projects we fund provide assistance to impacted communities as quickly as possible. For this reason, we're asking that applications be submitted within 30 days of the date of the invitation letter. Also, non-competitive awards will include a specific award condition confirming that time is of the essence and that projects must be implemented promptly. The abbreviated application period and this special award condition are necessary to respond to the unusual and compelling urgency of the coronavirus pandemic. Applicants who are unable to apply by the deadline can still apply for funding through the competitive process. So those are some of the highlights about EDA's CARES Act non-competitive awards. We greatly appreciate NARC's partnership and the work that you've done and will continue to do to help America's communities respond to and recover from this pandemic. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. And that is the end of our formal presentation, and we look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for giving us this great overview, over the CARES Act Recovery Assistance Program and sort of what's there and what we can expect over the next few months, what kind of projects are looking at being funded and at what levels. So thank you all so much for providing that information. Special thanks to John Atwood too, who wasn't a speaker but was very instrumental in putting this webinar on. So thank you all for being here today. And so as you can all see, we have plenty of time for Q&A. So I would definitely encourage you all to submit questions, comments, feedback that you're thinking about as you've seen this presentation. You could submit questions into the questions box on your GoToWebinar module. And not just, about the CARES Recovery Assistance either, but also sharing what's going on the ground in your region. Sort of what has COVID-19 brought up as far as issues in your area. Are you struggling with meeting the broadband needs? Are you struggling with increasing numbers in unemployment or business closures? I'm sure our friends over at EDA would really appreciate getting that on the ground perspective as well. So with that, I'll go to the first few questions that we have here. Let's see. Will EDA staff consider the establishment of a new revolving loan fund to help small businesses injured by COVID-19 recover? If yes, we may include this in our plan.
This is Dennis. Absolutely. EDA is open to all manner of different types of applications that are eligible under our Economic Adjustment Authority As I mentioned, it's a very flexible authority. It includes the ability for EDA to fund planning and technical assistance recovery strategies, to capitalize new revolving loan funds, to recapitalize existing revolving loan funds, as well as various different types of infrastructure investments. So we would absolutely be receptive to such a proposal.
Great, thank you. Next question. Is land acquisition eligible as part of a project application?
Sorry, Macy, you broke up a little bit on my
Sure.
speaker.
Sorry, Dennis. Is land acquisition eligible as part of a project application?
I think I would refer that question to one of our state or regional officials, and as part of your specific project proposal. Generally, EDA can fund a wide variety of different types of activities. Typically, land ownership, I believe, has to be already established prior to an EDA investment. But as with most projects, there may be some flexibility, so it's worth having a conversation with your regional office or your local economic development representative.
Okay, next question. Can grant funds be used as pass-through grants to support projects in targeted areas and opportunity zones?
So I'm not sure I'm going to answer this exactly correctly. Hopefully I will, but if the questioner would like further elaboration, maybe they can expand on that. So it is possible that EDA could make a grant to a larger organization that would then make sub-grants to other organizations within a region, and that could certainly be done in the context of an opportunity zone or other different economic development scenarios as well. Those types of sub-grant arrangements would be established up front as part of the overarching application, but such an arrangement is possible under our authorities.
Great. Okay, next question. Will competitive applications be reviewed at the EDA regional office level and/or the EDA central office?
D, all of the above. Actually, yeah, we are contemplating doing the vast majority of our grant making through our regional office structure. However, we do contemplate that there will be a pool of assistance that is available to support innovation and entrepreneurship related activities that will be run through our headquarters operation as well.
Perfect. Great. Will there be support for ongoing usage of Wi-Fi hotspots, $15 a month for a 12-month period for each recipient, for example, or mainly for the supply of such devices?
Well, I think the answer to that question is probably not for the purchase of individual Wi-Fi hotspots. However, EDA does have a broad flexibility, and we can support the development of broadband infrastructure to support business needs within a community or a region. We can also support the purchase of specialized equipment that's often done in the context of training facilities or other kind of specialized business needs. But however, Wi-Fi hotspots for individual use would probably not be a competitive EDA proposal.
Next question, does EDA anticipate any additional funding in future federal funding packages? I assume related to COVID-19.
So at this time, we are aware that there are some proposals as part of the various legislative packages that have been issued or contemplated for future COVID response funding. I think it's premature to speculate about whether or not those will come to fruition, or EDA may end up in them, but there have been some proposals that have involved EDA. So we're monitoring those closely to see whether or not any of them gain momentum and may be sources of assistance. I will say we have our hands full at the moment administering this large pool of additional assistance. So our focus is very much on trying to act with alacrity and get this assistance deployed and help to meet communities and businesses' needs right now.
Sure, yeah. Next question. With the standard scope of work given with the invites to the EDD institutional funding, how specific do the narrative and budget components need to be for submission for the non-competitive grants? How detailed do we need to be in order to turn around the application within the 30 days?
So I'm going to throw that one over to Brian, who I think was very involved in an internal working group that helped to develop the guidelines for that. You want to take that, Brian?
Sure. As was mentioned, there is a set scope of work activities that that you can kind of choose from. You can do one or a number of them, and the narrative I don't believe needs to be extremely long. If you received an invitation, you'll see in there's a template that can be used for the narrative and so forth. But it is not particularly long, if that answers the question.
Thanks, Brian. Next question. What is the maximum award amount for competitive grants?
So EDA really does not have maximum and minimum amounts. We do obviously have constraints based on the overall availability of resources. So I would counsel really anyone that's interested in looking at EDA assistance to start that conversation with your local economic development representative or regional office representative that you typically work with on grant applications for EDA. It's also worth noting that we have provided some up to amounts for the non-competitive awards that Brian mentioned. So we have issued those invitation letters, and what we're seeing is that many times a potential recipient will accept the full amount. Sometimes they're accepting a partial amount to meet a particular need, and other times they may be declining the non-competitive award. So it's really kind of running the full range. But in terms of the competitive awards, they vary in size considerably. Typical planning or technical assistance grant may be in the neighborhood of 100,000 or so, whereas a typical construction investment may be $1 million or more.
Great. Next question, is it required to have a SEDS in order to apply?
Yes, there is a requirement that that investments be made pursuant to a SEDS or a SEDS equivalent plan. So I would advise anyone who may not be in an area that is already part of SEDS that they should still reach out and start that conversation with EDA, because there are a variety of different ways that we can typically meet those needs, including working with the community to put in place a SEDS or an equivalent plan of some kind, or many times leveraging an existing plan that may be in place for other economic development purposes that meets those needs. And given the exigent economic circumstances that we're facing, as with most things, EDA is looking to be as flexible as we possibly can in working with communities to meet their needs.
Thank you. Next question. Regarding infrastructure projects, will EDA be open to funding design, engineering, and construction of an 11-mile trail project?
So I think that, again, I hate to keep referring people to our local representatives, but that is really the fountain of all knowledge and resources in terms of the project development process. Such a project certainly could be considered. It's going to be evaluated under the same kind of comparative competitiveness criteria as other projects. So if there was a strong case to be made around what the economic impact would be and some of the outcomes, it's a project that could be looked at. I think, again, I would start that conversation with your local economic development representative, as we do expect EDA requests for CARES Act assistance to be very robust, and that we will have a highly competitive process. We anticipate we could be oversubscribed in terms of applications many times over. So getting that guidance from your local economic development representative about the types of projects that are likely to be most competitive in meeting your region or community's needs is really the place to begin with EDA.
Great. Next question. Many of our rural communities want to do a variety of workforce housing projects like infill, rehab, etc., as a catalyst for recovery with this funding. Will EDA consider housing development related applications with a strong economic recovery case?
So generally, EDA does not fund housing, or I mean, we really don't fund housing. However, and there's usually an exception to that. In some instances, there might be cases where there's public infrastructure that's supporting a variety of different uses, or there's some type of a mixed use development with a focus on training or commercial uses of some kind that could potentially fall into the eligibility category. It's worth a consultation with the local EDR if your project falls more into that side, but a pure housing project would not be something that EDA would fund.
Thank you. Next question. RE non-competitive grantees, where can you get a list of which universities are included in this group?
Brian will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in addition to the economic development districts, there is also a listing of all of our currently funded university centers that are, it's on our website.
Great. Next question. If an economic development district wants to provide grants to cities for them to update economic development recovery plans, do each of those sub-grantees need to be known at the time of the application, or can the EDD state a specific amount of funding that they would make available to their communities to apply back for?
So that's a great question regarding the project scope, and I believe we've tried to structure our guidelines there to be as flexible as possible, but I would pose that question to your economic development representative or to your regional office representative as you're going about submitting your non-competitive application. it's one of those things where I think it would be very helpful to have as an understanding of as many of the partners as possible, but there again may be some flexibility there.
Great. Thanks for being a trooper, Dennis. we're getting through them. Next
No, these
one.
are all really great questions. I appreciate it.
Good. Next question, is there any requirement for local match for competitive grants?
So we published the NOFO, and we were very fortunate that Congress gave us the authority to go up to 100% in these grants. So we generally believe that our CARES Act funding will be made at a rate of between 80 and 100%, depending on the particular circumstances of the community. So most of our grant making should be occurring within that 80 to 100% range.
Great. Next, what is the approximate time from submittal of an application through to an MFC to being able to start a project?
So that's someone who's worked with EDA before. If you happen to know our kind of internal acronyms that we use to track milestones within our grant process. But the answer to that question is it tends to depend on the type of grant application. So planning and technical assistance grants typically move through the process a bit more quickly than RLF grants, and RLF grants tend to move through the process a bit more quickly than construction grants. And that just has to do with the complexity of the reviews that are necessary to do those different types of grants and the component pieces that are necessary. Most significantly is that for infrastructure grants, there are additional layers of legal review that are necessary because of the real property issues, and there are additional environmental and other architectural and engineering components that have to be reviewed. So it tends to take a bit longer for those grants to move through the process. I would say a rule of thumb would be, and I say this as only a rule of thumb because with our CARES Act implementation, we've been breaking records to date in terms of our turnaround times. For planning and technical assistance grants, it could be as short as 30 to 60 days. For construction grants, you're probably looking at something more like 60 to 90 days. Depending on once we have a complete application in hand. So the variable there might be how long it takes us to get all the pieces that are necessary to have a full review.
Great. Next question, are there any special requirements for proposing a business incubator, such as a market analysis or other?
Yes, and I would refer you to the notice of funding opportunity for our CARES Act fund. We've actually made our CARES Act notice of funding opportunity was published as an addendum to our regular annual economic development assistance program funding announcement for our public works and our economic adjustment assistance. And if you look at that NOFO, there are some specific requirements related to funding those types of projects. And I would say also, so that would be for the establishment of a new incubator. There are also an opportunity to provide for assistance that could support some of those activities potentially through a future challenge grant in the innovation and entrepreneur space as well. That would be less so on the brick and mortar side, but more so in terms of the connective tissue to support those types of activities within a region.
Thank you. Next question, how much EDA CARES Act funding do you expect to be available after the non-competitive awards?
So that question remains to be determined. I think you might mean after the competitive awards are completed. So what we have done is across the different categories that Brian mentioned on the call for our economic development district partners, for our tribal planning grantee partners, for our university center partners, and our existing revolving loan fund partners, we have offered them a grant up to a certain amount based on criteria that we've established. And those vary a bit based on other qualifying factors. And we don't yet know the answer to the question that I alluded to before as to whether all of them will accept the amount in its entirety, some portion thereof, or in some cases perhaps none. So what we have tried to do is put a framework in place where we can deploy as much assistance in as broad an area across the country, recognizing that we really badly need a national response through these non-competitive awards. And then making sure that we have available still, I think, a very substantial portion of the overall appropriation to support competitive awards, but we don't yet know exactly what that final breakout will be. I think within the next 60 days or so, we should have a much better sense of how those numbers are falling out.
Good. Okay. Final question that I have in my questions box. So if anybody else has any last remaining questions or thoughts, feel free to type it into the questions box. Can you outline the match requirement?
Yeah, again, I think this is similar to an earlier question that came in. Generally, we are anticipating that there will be a federal share of 80 to 100% for our CARES Act grantees. Now, for the non-competitive awards, Brian, all of those were at 100%, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, they were all at 100% for the non-competitive awards. And then the competitive awards would be considered on a case-by-case basis, but like Dennis says, we expect to be between an 80 and 100% grant rate.
Thanks, Brian.
Great. So the last question I see here is, when will this recorded session be made available? I am planning to upload it as soon as this ends, so hopefully by this afternoon it'll be up on our NARC YouTube page. So feel free to go check that out, but it'll definitely be sent out to everybody tomorrow via a GoToWebinar email, thanking you for your attendance and your registration. So be on the lookout for that. In the handouts, the PowerPoint presentation is there, but I'll be sure to include it in the follow-up email as well. There was one more question that came in while I was speaking. Do the non-competitive awards have a mix set aside of 10% for administration costs?
So, Brian, does that vary by category of award?
It does vary by category, but it's the like, for example, the maximum amount of administrative funding is 10% of the additional lending capital that's requested for RLFs. So, but it does vary by project, yeah.
So for the RLF awards, that is an established amount of 10%, but that may vary for the other three categories of non-competitive awards.
Great. Thank you all again, and I don't see any more questions coming in. So with that, I will toss it over to Leslie to give us our outro.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Macy. Thank you, Brian, Dennis, and Dana for all this great information. I would take Dennis up on his suggestions that you check in with your regional office, who are the answers to everything. We appreciate this. Appreciate you spending so much time with us. We look forward to working with you, and as this grant process unfolds. As Macy mentioned, this will be available soon. We encourage you to check out some of the other webinars that we have that have all been recorded. We are striving to get as much information out to you to help you in your communities deal with the new challenges created by the pandemic. NARC is here to help you. The one thing that we will be holding we were forced to cancel our in-person annual conference, which was coming up next in a couple of weeks in Detroit. We have switched to this new world of our virtual conference. So we also encourage you to check out our website and see what is available for you in the future. If you have any additional questions and want to send them to us, we will forward them to EDA. Once again, thank you so much to EDA. Thank you, Brian, Dennis, Dana, Dana, for all your help. Thank you so much. We will be in touch soon. Have a good day.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Enjoyed being with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you soon at our next conference.